started. Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Om Bhur Bhuvasuvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahavidyam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right. So everyone has their Gitas? Okay. So I figure we'll just dig in. Did everyone have a chance to look at it or read it ahead of time? Awesome. Oh, if everyone could just grab one of these. These are just little augmented thingies to try to help as we go through, just little things that I pulled out of other scriptures and stuff. So if everyone can take one, and you can keep it, obviously. All right, so anybody want to, this isn't a diatribe from me or a lecture, so does anyone, before I start talking, I want to hear you talk. It's boring to hear me just talk the whole time. So does anyone want to sort of do sort of the opening thoughts? Any sort of specifics or,
I felt like this was just Krishna's opening, like here's this opening letter, bullet point of everything he will cover in his dissertation, essentially.
Yeah.
I see it as, here is the main idea, here's all of those main ideas broken down into their main components, and then I'll go into it.
Yeah.
That's basically how I see chapter 2.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. It's kind of like when you write your essay, right, in school, and you do your 5-paragraph essay, and we have to make sure that our opening paragraph has all the point. The last sentence of the opening paragraph is going to do the 3 things that are coming in your body.
Well structured.
Yeah. So yes, it very much was like that. Anyone else have anything initially in terms of thoughts or in that sense? No. Okay. So so the name of the chapter is, so here again in the English, it's self-realization. It really, a better translation is the yoga of knowledge. So the actual Sanskrit word for it is Samkhya Yoga is the actual title of the chapter. It's, again, for those of you, obviously, that might be a little more familiar with some of the Indian philosophies, it's, I think, important to point out, or just for whatever, so it's not confusing, is in this particular chapter, so there is a school of philosophy in India called Samkhya, which predates all of this. It's pretty much the backbone philosophy for Vedanta, for yoga, for almost everything. And there is more information on that comes later in the Gita, but this is not that. So just sort of, so Samkhya, so Sam in Sanskrit means correct or proper, and then Kya means knowing. So I think it's Krishna's attempt to sort of start clearing up Arjuna's clouded mind, right? So I'm going to give you the knowledge now, again, kind of an overview of this dialogue that we're about to have. And so it's really sort of that nature of the soul is, kind of that beginning piece of it. So, so the first, few, sort of basically, verses 1 through, largely probably through about verse 10 is somewhat of a finalization / continuation of chapter 1, right? Arjuna's kind of in his last throes of his sort of, anxiety and his, sort of not knowing what's going on. So one thing that I've always liked, in this part is I love Krishna's, in fact, I love it so much I literally have it framed I have like a framed picture of Arjuna doing this with Krishna in our house with this written beneath it. Kind of, for me, I've always gotten inspired when I'm feeling maybe like down in the dumps or discouraged or whatever, is verse 2 and 3, basically. It's like, Krishna's not pulling any punches and he's just hitting him hard, right? So I'm going to read, this version is fine, but I like this sort of translation better. Whence in this perilous position has come upon you, this dejection, unlike of an Aryan, meaning like a noble soul, heaven excluding and disgraceful, Arjuna. Yield not to impotence. It does not befit you. Cast off this weakness of heart and stand up and fight, So I always love that. Like, it's inspirational for me when I am sort of feeling a little bit like, whatever. It's like, okay, get back on the horse, in terms of our spiritual journey and our sadhanas and things like that. So, any thoughts on any of these verses, in terms of the first parts, like where he's like, how can I bring myself? I mean, we kind of covered a lot of this last week. Any sort of other thoughts on that, in terms of that?
Also really like how he is not comforting. He is, what are you doing? This is mean and unworthy. Arise.
Right.
That to me, like, I've been in those states and having somebody with no pity for me
Right.
is exactly the right thing.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what Arjuna needs.
Right.
No pity, no comfort, just what are you doing?
Right. And so a lot of people will kind of take a lot of Arjuna's stuff and they'll interpret it as like, it's all this spiritual talk, right? He sounds kind of superficially like very wise in a way, right? I mean, if it were the modern day, Arjuna would be posting on Instagram, quotes, to justify his position. And you see that a lot, where you'll see a lot of people, quoting things or these kinds of sort of thought process to justify whatever their various philosophies are, and it all sounds really wise, but then is it really, and then what about thinking about like, just to kind of go in where he's like, I don't know if you noticed, like one of the things that I kind of picked up on was, sort of verses 4 and 5. If you notice the frequency that he's I. How can I kill myself? How can I do it? I don't even know, right? And so like, is he sort of in a certain sense, your mother or your mother-in-law, who will sort of, oh, woe is me, it's okay, I just won't eat, that sort of false martyrdom, right? Of, I'll just be a beggar, right? Like he goes, it's like he's a king of sorts or prince, I guess. And now, I'll just be a beggar. It'd be better, this false humility, right? And it's still very ego-driven, right? Because that's the ego doing that false martyrdom, right? In that sense. So when your mother-in-law is doing that, it's not that she's actually being humble or self-sacrificing. It's a manipulative trick to kind of be guilt trip you, right? And I think in some ways, Arjuna is sort of doing that in a certain sense, right? Yeah. Yeah.
In verse 4, who's Krishna and Drona?
So Bhishma and Drona, so this is why you should come to Mahabharata movie night, little quick plug, next week. So Bhishma and Drona are characters from the Mahabharata story. They're his teachers. So the whole setup is that he's having to fight against not only his cousins, but his teachers who taught him the arts of war and all this other stuff. And so he's dejected because he has to go basically fight against his own kith and kin. And so that's the setup of this whole thing. And so symbolic, that's the external story. Internally, the whole symbolism, if we're going to read into that like a literature class, is I'm going up against the things that made me who I am. And maybe they're my lower tendencies, but they still made me who I am today. So my ego doesn't want to kill my lower tendencies because it made me who I am, right? And so therein is the conflict, because I know I have to do it, but I don't want to do it at the same time. And so I'm wavering. And so this is why Arjuna is sort of the symbol of us who are on a spiritual path, because we're trying, on the one hand, we want to still enjoy our lives and still kind of indulge in all the good things of life, but then there's a part of us that's also pulled to this other thing, right, that we can't always explain, right? Like this sort of call to something else, that if you didn't have that call at all, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. You would have scrolled right on past, right? So that's the sort of the tug of war in Arjuna's heart. And so that's the setup of all of this. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else? Yes.
I mean, whenever I hear that, it just makes me think of this idea that, I mean, if like we want to be pure, we choose like non-violence, right? But this world is violent, so it's like, how do we operate along that? And it talks about aligning yourself with like basically bring God there and like everything, like look at it through that lens and do it, letting go of the result of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like act as if, but like whatever good or bad happens, that's not what you're doing. Right? It's like, as long as I bring it in and I do it with that. So it's like he's saying, like everything is up for battle. Like nothing is exempt from fight. Like even teachers, which seems like
right.
okay, like you shouldn't fight your teachers, right? Like they're your teachers or your family. But it makes me think about how we're all related, or we all came from the same thing. So that's why it's put up that way. That the battle is like him fighting everybody that he would love, whether he would care about, or that has been bringing him to who he is.
Right.
And that's the point, is like, you can't just quit. You can't just like say, oh, well, my peaceful path is to not do it. Well, the only way that would work is if you had no body and even your mind is acting. So you'd have to have no mind, and
right.
And you can't have that reality. Like that's not a choice.
Right. And that's the point, and we touched on that a little bit, last time, was whether you take this battle on this birth or you take it on in 50 births or whatever, right? Because we think about like, oh, I'm doing this now, right? But when you think about how many thousands of years ago, people were doing this, we're like slow learners, right? Like my wife always talks about old souls, right? Oh, they're old souls, whatever. And I'm like, all an old soul to me means is you're just a slow learner, right? Like that's not something to be proud of. Like I would rather be a young soul 5,000 years ago becoming enlightened, right? We're the morons that keep like, let's sign up for another round on the roller coaster, right? Until eventually it's like, I'm tired. Spiritually, right? Like it's not that there's anything wrong. It's not meant as escapism. It's called mumuksha, right? Like you'd have this sort of longing for freedom, right? And it's hard to explain if you don't feel it, right? It's like there's something else calling. It's like homesickness, right? Like I try to explain it sometimes to people and they're like, I don't understand what you're talking about. It's like if you've ever been on a really amazing trip, right? And it's been a great trip. But like at the end of the day, like you're kind of like, I'm ready to go home, right? Like it's been a good trip, nothing bad happened, but I want to go home. I'm kind of tired now. That like existentially, right? Like times whatever, right? That to me is that longing, right? And so when you're ready to fight the fight, you fight the fight in the sense of you have to fight to become free of the things that are holding us back. And it's not just bodily, right? It's really, everything is all about in here. Right? The bodily really is not that important in that sense. That's what the karma yoga is going to tell us, right? It's all the intention with which you do stuff. Come in. No, you're good. Yeah, please be comfortable. Because even if you die, you still have those tendencies, right? The real you in the sense of the limited version of you in your consciousness, right? They call them samskaras or vasanas, right? These tendencies that stick with you. Right? And so even if your soul becomes unmanifest, or they even say like in Samkhya or especially like in like in the Kashmiri Shaivism, right? The Trika, right? Like when Shiva basically pulls back the manifestation and it goes into the unmanifest. It's like the souls all get to kind of rest. But then when it projects back out, it all starts up again. It's all in seed form, right? And so in that sense, existentially, cosmically, we are not ever going to escape this until we escape it, right? So the battle is really that battle. And then yes, do you want to translate that into the world and all that? You know, if you're like, well, I want to fight for social justice and this other, you can certainly interpret it that way if that's indeed your dharma, right? And that's where we have to be a little careful with extrapolating too much with the story, because in this case, Arjuna was a warrior. So it was his dharma to fight, right? So it's not a call to us all becoming warriors. That's how sometimes people interpret it. And it's like, well, he was a warrior by his very nature and his upbringing, so he was called to fight. Whereas if Arjuna had been a Brahmin, which is the priestly caste, and having the conversation with Krishna, Krishna wouldn't be telling, one of these other people, Uddhava or whoever, to go fight, right? So that's where we have to be a little careful of overdoing it with the literary interpretation of the story, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be this, that it's his job that matters. Like, it doesn't matter what we do, or, that he's a warrior. I mean, we all have whatever we're doing, I guess, and that's the fight. Like, sometimes I feel like my fight is, I'm a teacher, and sometimes I don't want to be in control of these children. I want to, let go. And I want to be the boss, because being bossy is not really my philosophy.
Right.
But I have to be, because that's my job, right?
Yes.
So that's my fight, or whatever, is, how to be, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, and, let it happen. And,
because you've taken that role. Right? So if you took the role of the teacher, then your job is, by definition, to maintain that decorum or that discipline or whatever the right word is that you're comfortable with. Because if you don't do that and you let the kids run wild, you're actually not doing your duty properly, right? You're not doing so dharma, right? That word dharma it is the innate beingness of that person or thing, right? The dharma of fire is to be hot. The dharma of water is to be wet. The dharma of a warrior is to fight. The dharma of a teacher is to teach, right? If you're not doing that, you're not doing your dharma.
And it always exists within that, right, the ganas. So then there's the inactivity, and the activity, and then the harmony and equilibrium of being the teacher, right? So as it's coming our way, same. In every moment, our duty as a teacher, but balancing those, making things happen and then allowing them to.
Yeah.
Not to mention, there's, I think we'll also talk a little bit further about it in the next chapter, but everything you do is setting an example too. So if you also let loose, what is that telling kids? It's
Right.
okay to let loose. So you have to learn how to balance. My action is not attached to what's going to happen. They may listen, they may not. But for those who are listening, they see your calmness. And they calm down.
Yeah. You were going to say something? Thank you.
I was saying a similar thing that because we all have very tough situations all the time in our life. And then I think this phrases 4, 5, and 6 is when the things are tough, are you going to retract or are you going to stand up and fight?
Right. Right. And so in that sense, right, yeah, and had he given up, then they would have just figured he chickened out.
Right.
And then he'd be mad at Krishna after the fact, right? It's like, why did you let me not fight? You should have known I was just freaking out. Why did your buddy that needs to give you some tough love, right? Had Krishna just let him do it and chicken out, whatever, not fight, then afterwards they would be making fun of him. He'd be whatever, and then Krishna, well, you said no. So was it the right thing for Krishna to give him some tough love? I think once we understood that, then the answer was yeah, right? We don't like tough love. It hurts at the time, but maybe that's what we need to hear.
I also find it interesting of that part of the passage of mentioning the social consequences, even though from many perspectives that really doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
on this level, he's saying it matters more than anything. It's worse than death for a warrior to be told they're a coward, they ran from war.
Right.
It's the most adharmic thing for a warrior. So I guess in a way, yeah, that is worse than death for a warrior to be told.
Right.
But like if, Sabrina gossips about me a little bit of something I didn't do, that's not worse than death. But
Right.
that's because that's not my dharma.
Right.
So that's
Exactly.
how I saw that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, because he's going to talk to him in that language that's going to sting,
Right.
right? Like, oh, yeah, because kind of thing. So, yeah, so and I love also in you notice how Krishna's basically said nothing almost this entire time, and he's just letting Arjuna ramble and ramble and ramble,
Dig your
right?
grave.
Dig your grave, exactly, right? And then at, verse 10, as he stood between the two army, Krishna smiled, right? Like, all right, buddy.
I love that.
He's just sitting there. You could just kind of picture him just like, kind of thing. So, finally, Arjuna's kind of like shocked into sort of listening, right? And so then that, I think, then brings us to verse 11. And from verse 11 until, quite a while down is really kind of the second sort of section, which is really that overview of that Samkhya, that logic of the philosophy, right? So, there's certain quotes that are always brought up, when you listen to various Swamis talk or whatever. And to me, 11 to 12 are sort of notable, I call them the notable quotables, right? That, it's kind of like with Christians, like John 3:16, right? They always quote that one, right? And so this is one of those, right? And so, you speak sincerely, but your sorrow has no cause. You're using all kinds of big words, but right? The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead, right? There's never been a time when you and I and the kings gathered here have not existed, nor will there be a time that will cease to exist, right? And so what are your thoughts on that quote? Because this is really starting to introduce permanence of the soul, reincarnation concepts, things we kind of take for granted now, like, oh yeah, well, of course, but if you think about it, where did that come from in the Indian scriptures, right? Well, these are some of the places. Yeah.
I just have a little question on what would be grieving for the living? I get grieving for the dead, when they pass away. But
Yeah.
Would it be feeling sorry for someone who doesn't get it, or they're not as aware, or
Any reason to dig
or
something.
Or like
just
somebody has an
pity,
addiction, or like somebody's
Pain.
not.
Somebody's in pain.
in pain, and just so not to be sad or unhappy for either way, I don't know, just that idea. I guess I want to hear.
Yeah, of course. Well, jump in.
Yeah, so basically, in Indian philosophy, if you are living on this planet, that means you are manifesting some of the karmas of your past. So if you're not or if you're not alive, that means you don't have any balance of karma left. So what what's the word?
Mm-hmm.
Salvation? You are just
Nirvana.
Nirvana. You are into that Nirvana phase. So basically your existence, that's why it is said that you want to pity the living. Because if
You're
you are
stuck
dead,
here too.
you are
Yeah.
just in that Nirvana phase.
I mean, ultimately, so it's kind of like, who is the killer and who is slain? Who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed? Who, right? Who, when you want to look at these opposites, right? That we, in our limited view of, okay, I happen to be in this body with this sort of birth in this country at this time, whatever, and whatever is happening, right? But if we take if we zoom out, everyone who is being oppressed was the oppressor at one point. Everyone who's being murdered was the murderer, right? When you look at it cosmically, it's now we're just going through, in a certain sense, that the karmic cycle, right? So in that sense, it's a terrible thing from our limited point of view, whatever the case may be, but is it really terrible from the cosmic point of view if it's allowing those people to sort of, let's say, get rid of some bad karmas from their past? right? I mean, you look at like the Indian airline that, crashed, a month ago or whatever. I mean, it's awful, right? It's horrible. But in theory, big picture, they all signed up for that. For whatever reason, right? Their soul knew that was how they were going to check out of the hotel, so to speak, right? And so then, it's tragic from our limited perspective. So I'll give you a quick side story that they talk about this. So the very, very beginning of the Mahabharata, the super duper beginning, right? The way that like the whole thing gets set up, that really the consequence of this actually that sets everything, it's a perfect inroad to this thing, is there's this king Sanatu who falls in love with this beautiful woman who ultimately, unbeknownst to him, is the Ganga Devi, right, in kind of human form. And she's gorgeous, and she's like, hey, I'll marry you, but you can never question me on what I do, right? Okay. So he's so in love, he's like, sold, right? Here's no prenups, let's go, right? So as they're going through their marriage, one by one, she's having these sons. And one by one, she goes to the river and drowns them and just killing them. And like the king's like, dude, like what the heck? But he made the thing, he couldn't question her, right? And so finally, like on the sixth one, and correct me if I'm saying the story wrong. Is it the eighth one? Seventh? Okay. Eventually he's like, I can't, so correct me if I'm saying the story wrong. He's like, I can't take it anymore, right? And so he's like, what do you, he questions her. And so she's like, then she kind of reveals, and she says that basically the people that, the bodies or the babies she was drowning, basically it was a boon for them. They had so little karma left and to be liberated that they signed up to basically be killed essentially and finish it up, right? But because he questioned her, then the last one, right, she doesn't drown, but then she leaves, right? So from his perspective, it was awful, right? But from their perspective, because she had the bigger picture, it was actually compassionate. So who's right and who's wrong? It starts to get a little bit more fuzzy, and that's why when we start looking and changing our point of view, then it becomes a little bit like, okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's not to have any feelings either way, because it's none of our business in some ways. It's like, well, we have no idea of knowing, so like, why agree either? Like,
well,
we don't
See,
understand
yeah.
like that it's sad at all either way. Like, is you know what I mean?
So this is one of the critiques of the philosophy from the externals, is that this philosophy then can run the risk of does this make you heartless and devoid of feelings, and you're basically become a statue to the suffering of others, right? And this misconstruction and misinterpretation of the scriptures, because, well, if it's all their karmas, then why do I have to help the poor? That's their karma, right? So that's the critique of it where it gets misinterpreted, right? So what do you think is the actual interpretation? What do you guys think is, like, what would you say?
Like we all have assumed identities when we are there in this world. It can be a teacher, it can be a mother, it can be someone who takes care of poor people or whatever. We all have that assumed identity and we have to fulfill that. But we have to perform the actions under the assumed identity with no reward or with no anticipation that there will be a reward.
I'm wondering if this part about not grieving the living is a warning to us when we think that we know something, or we are at a certain place within society. So it's easy to say to go around my little town and say oh, I feel so sorry for those people that live over here, that their little house falling apart. It must be really hard to be them. But then I come here, and then there's these mansions on the lake, and I wonder, do those people feel sorry for me and my little 3-bedroom nice little house with my yard and my big events? They must think, oh, that would be so hard to live out there in that little 3-bedroom shack of where we are those who aren't like where we are. And we maybe like to say like, well, that person has it really, really bad because they're under this bridge over here and they have an addiction and they have like, legal issues. But according to like this, it's like us grieving for those levels make no sense because that's really like where they are. Like I look at the mansions and think, oh, I would never want to do that. That's not that there's no desire there. So how condescending or level of security they might have living down or grieving for people who are living through their Dharma, whatever that is. If I'm being doing that.
I see this like the grieving is more so a mistaken identification of don't grieve for the living or the dead because technically there's no point. And like it's not saying the grieving itself is bad. Grief is fine. Feelings are fine. It's just mistakenly placed.
Right.
That's how I see it.
So, yes. So I think the intent really is we grieve, but we don't become grief.
Yes.
Right? Yes, it's tragic. Yes, we don't want to be heartless, unfeeling people, right? But we also, if we can keep the slightly, it's again that pulled back view,
Keep that knowledge.
that it's like, yeah, it's terrible. But at the same time, if I also understand that those are souls and not bodies, then suddenly my perspective changes a little bit. And maybe it's tragic and it's horrible and all of those things 110%. But it doesn't pull you into the depths of sorrow the same way. Because also, if you think about it, like let's look at the recent tragedies with the flooding that we had, right? How much more is the grieving as a result of attachment? So I didn't have anybody that died in the floods, and while I certainly feel sadness and grief for the tragedy that it was, it didn't immobilize me in the sense of to the pit of my grief. Whereas if one of my daughters had decided to be a camp counselor for her summer job there, and she had drowned in the river, like, I don't know how well I'd be able to do this right now, right? Because I have a differentiating attachment, right?
This may be like focused on non-dualism, I guess, too.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you also see like sadness and grief are just another way Krishna expresses himself?
Yeah.
Which is what makes them more okay. Like, don't avoid them. That's just another expression. You know? And don't get too attached to it. Like you said, don't make yourself the grief. But this is just part of his play, right?
Exactly. And he says that very thing. So if you look at the 14, so it's a perfect segue into 14 and 15, right? Does someone want to read it so it's not just me talking the whole time? Please.
When the senses contact sense objects, a person experiences cold or heat, pleasure or pain. These experiences are fleeting. They come and go. Bear them patiently, Arjuna. Those who are unaffected by these changes, who are the same in pleasure and pain, are truly wise and fit for immortality. Assert your strength and realize this.
Right? So I think this is what he's saying, right? Like, this is the nature of life, right? There's going to be joy, there's going to be sorrows. This is the up and down. This is just the nature of it.
Bear them patiently.
Huh?
Bear them patiently, they come and go.
Yeah,
This too shall pass.
right. Good and bad.
It seems
Right.
like grief is like an extreme version of sadness. It's like, I think there's the level, like, for me, I hear don't go to that extreme. It's like, it's okay, like, I mean, then I felt it happened, but then I knew that, like, 4 days later, I was gonna go to Schlitterbahn and I started feeling guilty. I was like, should I be happy, like, enjoying my birthday present?
Right.
And then I started thinking about this and going like, okay, I need to let it go. They're probably off in the other realm, like in their astral plane, and everything's fine.
Right.
And I could let it go. So I didn't go to the extreme of grief.
Right.
But you know, I had a feeling of like, well, that's sad. Like the situational aspects.
It's
of it,
horrible,
like,
yeah.
I wouldn't want people to experience pain. Like, you know.
Exactly. So I think we can still maintain compassion and be feeling and be present with and with joy and sorrow. We also, the opposite extreme, right? We're using lots of versions of sorrow, But they would argue, I think, it would also, you shouldn't go to the absolute crazy extremes of joy,
Ecstasy.
right? In that sense, because that too is fleeting, right? And so this is that equanimity, right? Because you have, that's where you'll hear this word detachment a lot. It doesn't make you unfeeling, it just, you pull just a little back, right? And you're watching the movie on the screen a little bit, right? And sort of all the world is the stage and we are merely players, right? And I think it's the above, right? The point of view that you're just pulled just a little bit back. Not so much so that you're uncaring, but just a little bit so you're not so subject to the highs and the lows as much.
I personally experience it like simultaneous
Mm.
where you have to hold both at the same time. You have to hold the sorrow, the grief, the tragedy of how horrible and painful this really is. Really sitting. Then have that detachment, have that greater view of understanding, and it's perfect, and it's within the design as it is, and there's work to do, so get on with it. We're not able to save these children. We are able to do things right now. We are able to talk about these children, honor them, and that is a form of grief. Grief doesn't have to be, I'm lost in it, and I'm crying, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just, no. If I'm lost in it, I'm not helping anything, and I'm lost in that moment, I'm not here.
Right.
I love that you use the word honor, because as you're describing holding it and experiencing it, like you're just having it, felt like honor and respect for like something that wasn't about us.
It's
And
not about
it's
us.
it's like about the bigger experience of what all this is. You just hold it there and recognize
Yes.
that.
Exactly. And so I want to, because it kind of folds and then I want to go backwards a little bit, but kind of, again, it's one of those other notable quotables I like to say, kind of so 19 and 20, right? One believes he is the slayer, another believes he is the slain. Both are ignorant. There is neither slayer nor slain. You were never born, you will never die. You have never changed, you can never change. Unborn, eternal, immutable, immemorial, you do not die when the body dies. That's the key, right? That's if you realize that and you start to actually change your perspective to understand that, then suddenly, what are you grieving exactly, right? Yes, the body has died and it's tragic, but if we believe in the permanence of the consciousness, right, and the soul, so to speak, then it becomes a little bit less horrible. Because it's like, well, yeah, right? It never died. So then to go backwards a little bit, I mean, they fold into each other, right? So let's hit a little bit of a heavier topic here. The impermanent in 16. The impermanent has no reality. Reality lies in the eternal. Those who've seen the boundary between the two have attained the end of all knowledge, right? So realize that which pervades the universe and is indestructible. No power can affect this unchangeable reality, right? So what does that mean exactly? The impermanent has no reality and reality lies in the eternal. What do you guys think of that? Because this is a big point of argument in Indian philosophy. That's why I wanted to hit it.
Maya, illusion, all of this is just
Yeah,
a
this
dream.
body, our existence, this room, everything that is surrounding us is just impermanent. It's not going to be there always. There will be that one true soul or whatever you call it that is inside us. That is permanent, and that's going to go on.
Right.
Living its life. If we have some karmic values left, or it just salvation otherwise. We're all accept.
So here's the question. Yes, I agree. So here's the fun question, the philosophy question, right? That they argue. So we're all here. We're in this room. Are we? Is this not real? Is it not true? Does it have no reality? Is this just actually illusion? What is this? We're here, aren't we?
Yeah.
So is it not real, or how? So when they're saying that it's asat, right, versus sat, true, real, versus asat. What do we think, right? Because this is where all the guys argue with each other, right? Like, is this real? Is this not real? Is it? We know it's not permanent,
I think that's really the thing to focus on.
right?
Is like whether or not it is real, doesn't matter. Your experience of it is the same.
Right.
So regardless, what are you going to do about it? If it's real or not real, you're going to do the same thing. So understanding more the impermanence of it, I think, gives you more of a practical perspective of what you can actually do, which is understand what I'm doing is not going to last. So don't have attachment to it, because if I did, oh no, the leaves off the tree are falling off, put them back on.
Right.
If I had any attachment to the permanence of that tree, then I would be in sorrow.
Right.
But if I more so accept the impermanence as that baseline, everything's a lot easier.
That's great. I think that's well said. Right? Because people will argue this, right? You know, is this just a projection of consciousness, kind of like a slit lamp, the double slit lamp? Is this actually just an illusion and it doesn't actually have any existence at all? Like, you know, where it's like the rope and the snake kind of analogy that, you know, they'll use. You know, the philosophers will argue amongst themselves, but from a practical reality, whether ultimately when we get to that level of understanding, I guess we'll figure it out. But right now, I think the take home is that this has a dependent existence. It's a dependent reality, not an independent reality. You know, so I like the example, you know, two examples that will be used sometimes is a reflection, like in a mirror, right? Like, does the reflection exist?
I perceive it.
It's there. There's a reflection there. So in that sense, yes. But it doesn't exist at the same time, independent of me being in the reflection, right? In that sense. So that reflected version of me exists but doesn't exist at the same time, right? Or like if we're in a dream, right? And we have whatever the dream is, did the dream exist? Well, yeah, it did, because I remember dreaming about this, that, and the other. But at the same time, it was a projection of my own mind. So did it actually exist? Well, yes and no, right? So it's kind of like that, you know what I mean, in that sense. But the point being...
If a tree falls in a forest and
well,
around here...
yeah, if there's no perceiver, and that's the whole point of the physics thing, right, with the slit lamp. If there was no perceiver of the light, of the photons going through, right? Are we all familiar with this?
So from a
The double slit, right? If there was no perceiver of the photons, right, then they stay waves. If there's a perceiver, then they become photons. I mean, like, right. And they proved after that experiment that all energy does that, including every physical entity does that. Yep, all matter is that. Oh, sorry.
One thing I've heard that I really like one explanation, is that it's all real, but the illusion is just over-identification of ego.
Yes.
So if you can let go of that illusion, then it's like, and the boundary between me and you is gone. Like I know, I can see all that at once, I guess. It almost becomes automatic to do actions without being attached to the fruit of them first. But you don't just leave your ego and go away forever. It's just recognizing it makes it easier to not depend on the fruit of your actions.
Right. Right. And then, you know, and this is where there was a couple, like on those little augmented pages that, you know, one of the, so I think at the top of the front one, these are just things as I'm reading them, like things will just come into my mind. So that's the rambling of my mind. But it was one of the, what are called the Mahavakyas, which is the great sayings that are kind of extracted from the Upanishads. And one of them was Prajnam Brahma, right? Which means consciousness is Brahman, right? Brahman meaning that's the underlying consciousness of the universe. And that same consciousness in us is that consciousness, right? Or if you read any Indian philosophy, the one that comes up the most often is the Tat Tvamasi, right? You are that, right? That one they use a lot. They don't use this one as much, but it's that, right? So if we can understand and appreciate the consciousness that does exist within us, that's how we center in, right? We're that consciousness. We're not all these external envelopes, right? The body, the mind, the intellect, and all that other stuff, or pranas, and all that. So that permanence is there, right?
Well, I found it really, I guess, surprising, edge, with like this whole like, states of matter and all the things and quantum physics and right. And then reading this, it was talking about these levels of consciousness, like Kennedy were talking about. How there's the unconscious and then the dreaming state and the waking state, and there's also this other like higher form of consciousness that you're referring to like right now, the Brahman state.
Right.
And then it just made me think, everything I ever learned from Freud was just basically that, with the levels of consciousness and the iceberg.
Right. And this kind of reminds me what you were talking about, right?
Ego, superego. It's like this is psychology that we've been talking about for 200 years, and it's been here for like the ancients and the Hermetics have been talking about the exact same thing. And
Yep.
it's just,
Exactly. No, that's a great, we were
Western psychology is perfect.
Yeah, Arzu was mentioning the same thing at lunch couple weeks ago about Freud and everything, and the id and the superego and stuff. So,
it's all,
yeah, it is. It's all kind of rehashed, I guess. One thing again, I just wanted to point out as part of again that second sheet, the 19 through, and again just as cross references, the 19 and 20 are almost word for word lifted out of the Katha Upanishad, so I put the actual quotes there. So just if you just want to have some cross references there, you can see like it's almost. And this kind of goes. I forgot what was your name again? I forgot. I'm sorry.
Leonard.
Leonard. That's right. So we were talking about before, like where this is sort of a summary of the Upanishads. So that quote is right out of, or almost like word for word out of one of the Upanishads. So. Just kind of to harken back to what we were talking about. All right, anything else on this page before we go to the next page? I was kind of looking at the time too. Okay, so then 22 is again one of those other kind of very kind of frequently quoted, and again harkening back to concepts of reincarnation. As one abandons worn out clothes and acquires new ones, so when a body is worn out and a new one is acquired by the self who lives within, right? So we're establishing sort of this reincarnation philosophy in that regard, right? So again, we kind of take that for granted in our modern day, but just wanted to point that out as a frequently quoted passage, basically. And then as we go down I don't want to dominate this, so any thoughts on any of the other sort of 23 through sort of 29 in terms of the self cannot be pierced with weapons, or any thoughts on kind of why those are delineated, or?
I think it's just further reiterating that nothing can affect this.
Right.
All similar.
Right, and he's kind of going through it too, like if you look at it, like if you look at the elements, right? Like the old kind of what are called the tattvas, okay? The sort of the subtle elements that is ultimately behind creation, right? Then you've got, ether, air, fire, water, earth, right? And so, weapons, are earth, fire, water, wind, right? So in a certain sense, without saying it, he's saying, hey, the self is beyond the five elements, even the subtle elements, right? And that's why when we're killing or killed, and none of this is actually affecting the highest self, right? All right, and then what else is on there? How about like down on like 28? Every creature is unmanifested at first and then attains manifestation. When its end has come, once again it becomes unmanifest. What is there to lament in this? Any thoughts on that at all? Like, how does that work exactly? Unmanifestation, then you manifest, then you unmanifest again. Like, any thoughts on that?
Manifestation, like our reality right now is our
Mhm.
manifestation.
Yeah.
And then when this ends, we're now unmanifested. We're bodiless, I guess, or whatever else
Yeah.
is out there.
It helps me to see everything within its own cycle. So like, I don't know what grade your kids are, but like it would be like us looking at our school children saying like, I'm lamenting where they are when they're, third grade. Like we would like lament where they're at. That's exactly the fun.
Anybody else?
Same thing and taking that then to the extremes of what it is to lament when someone has passed. And you understand from that other perspective of it's just the unmanifest. So from that perspective, I am not lamenting. From the human perspective, I may be greatly lamenting. This may be my mother, for all I know. But from that perspective, she's unmanifest. It's the end of the cycle. What is there to lament?
And
Very
I think the limit that I feel is just
Right.
my place in my own personal cycle of
That's everybody,
worrying
though.
about my own attachment and letting that thing go.
Absolutely.
Anybody on this side? So I don't know if you guys, I mean, one of the examples that's used a lot when you read all this stuff is the concept of the mud in pots, right? Or clay in pots, right? As used as a frequent example to help the mind. And again, these are always imperfect examples, but these are old, very classic examples. Is you guys familiar with it? You guys want to speak to it?
That clay, like metaphor of the stuff that we're made of is clay, and when we are manifest, we're made into whatever the clay is made of, a pot, a figure, whatever, and then unmanifest gets put back down into its main stuff. It's whatever it can be again.
Right. So the clay always had the potentiality to be plate, cup, mug, whatever, pot. All of those manifestations, it had the potential. It's timeless, right? It's infinite, in the sense that all of those have that possibility in the mud or in the clay. They'll say mud back in all of this stuff, right? But clay for us, right? So all of those are unmanifested in the mud. Then we create whatever we create out of them. Now they've become manifest, but did they cease being mud or clay? They're clay whilst they're having a manifestation, and then time passes, it breaks down, it's returned back to just clay form again. And so it's still, now it's unmanifest, right, again, but it was clay at the beginning, it was clay during, and it's clay after.
The next question of, well, if it was a mug and then it was put back to here, where's the mugness go?
Right.
And those are many different fields of philosophy I love to talk about.
I wonder,
Right.
that's why a lot of these ancient cultures, we think, had this ritual of breaking pots, like when people would pass, or when times were ending, or when transitions happened, they would break these pots that are hard to make, I guess.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
That's cool.
So that's the manifest universe, right? That's not just us, that's the manifest universe in general, right? Whether it's accidental or it's intentional becomes a point of debate, right? But that's, I think, when you think of it that way, and we start to, or another example that's used a lot is the wave in the ocean, right? That's frequently used, right? The ocean is the background. The wave is just you're a wave and you're a wave and you're a wave and I'm a wave and we're all separate waves. And before the wave forms, we're ocean. Whilst we're a wave, we're ocean. And once the wave crashes, we're ocean. We never ceased being ocean the entire time. It was just that we had this temporary existence manifested as a wave of air. And you're a big wave and I'm a little wave and he's a clean wave and you're a dirty wave. In the sense of whatever superimpositions of waveness we've put on it, at the end of the day, it was all just one ocean, right? And so then if the wave crashes,
Oh no.
in that sense, when we're looking at it from the point of view of the ocean, as a wave, I don't want to crash, right? Because then I think I cease to exist, but I don't, right?
I wonder why didn't Arjuna ask it for more clarification? What do you mean by self? Like, how did you come up with this whole philosophy that this doesn't exist, or manifestation or manifestation? Why did he go ask for deeper explanations? Like, that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Because everyone can interpret it in their own way, right? Like,
Any thoughts? Why does Arjuna keep pushing for more clarification?
I think it's doubt still. I think it's doubt in himself. I think it's doubt in his own faith. Of what if my faith isn't enough? What if
Right.
I'm not good enough? What if I'm not? I think it's self-doubt.
Right.
And then that's why Krishna would have to say just a little bit in 39, just a little, even a little effort for spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear, and it's his greatest fear. Is this what he's paralyzed
Is
by
that
killing all the people that he loves?
Yeah, that's
He
it's
sees no purpose for that.
right. It's kind of like, I mean, why do we still doubt? You've heard, so you've no doubt heard various gurus talk. No doubt you know this, that, or the other, right? I mean, growing up and everything. Why are you still ignorant? Why haven't you woken up? Right?
Yeah.
I've read these scriptures like ad nauseum and I'm still stupid. Right? So why am I not awake? I know it intellectually. Right? Why do I still need to read all these Vedas and scriptures and all this? Is it because I lack faith? Is it I'm just really, really have a hard shell of ignorance? Is it both? Probably a bit of both, right? Right? Because otherwise, huh?
Is this a human condition that we never think we're good enough? Or that we never think we're
I
enough?
think if we think it's the human condition, then for sure we're always going to think, I'm never enough. I
Right.
think he's trying to say, hey, wake up. That's not
We
the human
identify with
condition.
the failures, with the successes, with with whatever's good or whatever's bad too much. And it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle, everyday struggle.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah. So, any last thoughts? I'm looking. It's noon. Time flies when you're having
I just
fun.
think he's at a crossroads, and I think he's finally ready to listen. Is how I hear his character, him as a person. I mean, otherwise, Krishna wouldn't be there, and the book wouldn't happen, right? He's finally like at a moment where he's like, okay, I thought giving up was an option, and it's not. So what do I do?
Right.
Please tell me and help me figure this out.
Right.
When the student is ready, the mentor appears.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a good. Yeah. So, yeah.
I love it.
Any last thoughts? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschik Dukhabhag Bhavet Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti